You guys ready? We're gonna start training. So, yeah, well, it's 7 o'clock now. We're gonna start the training session of our meeting. And then promptly at 7:30, we'll start our regular agenda. So with that, Mr. Clark has some information he wants to share with us around the city's thinking on affordable housing.
Yes, the council had me over last Monday, or I guess a week from Monday, and wanted to have a workshop on affordable housing. That seems to be a high priority on their list right now. And so they asked me to come in and make some recommendations about how we could deal with zoning to provide some incentives or jumpstart some affordable housing options in the city, additional ones. So this is the part of the memo that I put together for the council. I thought it'd be good to get some feedback from the planning board. The first idea, and this one's been sort of on the back burner for a while, but it seems to me the most logical thing to do. The city has a senior affordable housing overlay district that nobody pays much attention to because it was put in place in 2012 to allow the hospital to be converted to affordable housing. So they customized the zoning provisions in that section for that particular building. So it essentially doesn't apply anywhere else in the city, or it would be really odd if it did, because they had things in there like it has to be an adaptive reuse of a building over 50 years old. How's that for an incentive? So my first suggestion was to revise the senior affordable housing option to make it available all over the city for new construction and for smaller lots. Because not only they require 50-year-old existing building, but they also gave the allowable units per acre at only 4 per acre, which is like suburban zoning. It doesn't apply for multifamily zoning unless you have a very big parcel, which the hospital had a very big parcel. So the second suggestion was to substantially increase the allowable units to something more like what's equivalent in the GB district or the LI district, or maybe the transitional district. They also have a minimum 20 dwelling units. There's no reason to have 20 dwelling units. It could be 5 or 10 or something that would be accommodated on a small lot. And this is really strange. They put the parking standards at 1.2 spaces per unit for senior housing. Anywhere else in the city, other than this senior housing overlay zone, you can provide senior affordable housing or senior housing at all at 0.66 per unit. So they doubled the requirement for this overlay district of what?
Did they lower it down to 0.5?
No, that's my suggestion.
Oh, okay.
It's 1.2 spaces per unit now, and that's because the hospital had a big parking lot. So they could afford it. They already had the parking all set up. So I also just suggested you could take it from 62-year-old minimum to 55 or 60, something more flexible.
I'm particularly offended by that one.
I'm in.
I think we all are. No.
Sooner have to come to the...
55-year-olds are called active adults, actually, in the trade. They have the percentage requirement of the area median income at 100% of median income, which seems high. The affordable workforce housing is 80%. You could even go lower to 70% or 60% so that you targeted more low-income housing. And then they also not only require you to go through a rezoning process to get into the senior housing overlay zone, but then you have to do a special permit on top of that from the city council before you go to the planning board for site plan. So it's like a 3-step process, which makes no sense if you're trying to incentivize affordable housing. So all these things seem to ring a bell with the council. I'm not sure. They didn't give me any directive, active instructions to go after this and mark it up and make the zone more flexible, but it seems like a logical thing to do.
Just a refresher on what the overlay district is currently. Is it just that particular lot you mentioned?
Yep, it's the only lot identified in the city as currently zoned for that.
How is, that kind of sounds like spot zoning to me, or am I
Well,
misunderstanding?
that's why it was framed as an overlay district, because theoretically, it could apply anywhere in the city. Any place with a 50-year-old building that was already there and that had a big parking lot already, and, you know, it makes no sense, because in essence, it's been around for over 10 years now, and one parcel has been zoned that way.
What is the incentive to develop, senior affordable housing? If you are a developer, how do you attract that kind of project rather than a high-end condo development?
There's state money available.
Subsidy.
So there's certain developers, organizations that want to provide senior housing and low-income housing, and they can get state money to do it. But they have to have a site with the right zoning. So if we open up the city to more sites. So what I did next was well, first of all, I want to show you, these are the R1 districts in the city under existing zoning. So you can see something like 85–90% of the city is zoned for R1, single family only. The only other option is an accessory apartment. So 80–90% of the city is off limits to multifamily housing, which is the way you provide most senior or affordable housing. So allowing this overlay district to be used anywhere in those R1 districts would be a great opportunity if you had the right site. So I looked around the city to see, well, maybe there's no sites available, and everybody says Beacon's built out, we're sort of at the limit. Well, there's sites available, and I haven't talked to any of the owners of these sites. I just pulled them off the parcel access. But for instance, the Elks parcel, everybody knows the Elks parcel at the corner of Tironda and Walcott. That's a big parcel, 4 acres, almost 4 acres. And about half of it is used. You can see the buildings in the back, the big parking lots in the back. So in theory, they could put 2 acres on the market or cooperate with a developer who wants to do senior affordable housing. And if it was properly zoned, under the current zoning, you can only put 16 units on that property if you had half the lot. But if it was zoned at the same development potential as a transitional district, it would be 33 units. Or if you went to the same development potential that you have in the GB or the LI district, you could get 56 units on that property, in theory. We don't know how it would look, but in theory, there's a good site within walking distance of Main Street where you could put affordable housing.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there's any specific criteria that makes sense for placement of affordable senior housing relative to public transportation.
If it's walkable to, your grocery store and stuff, it's better, right?
Yeah.
Well, who at that age wants to walk anywhere?
I know people who are in their early 70s and are living in apartments on Main Street who walk to the grocery store.
Well, if the affordable housing, if the senior housing is large enough, has enough units, they usually have a kitchen and they provide meals and that sort of thing as an option. So you can be self-independent. I mean, the people at Highland Meadows and Meadow Ridge are pretty isolated, but they seem to be pretty successful because they cater to seniors who, in theory, if you have enough units, you can have a shuttle bus on site or.
So is the underlying purpose to increase the availability of senior affordable housing? I'm assuming that's what the goal is, right? Ultimately,
that's what it says.
The city's goal is to do just that, increase availability of senior affordable housing.
So what I was reading through the actual requirements in the senior affordable housing overlay district. What would the actual revisions look like? I mean, a change in the age, and then eliminating the requirement that there be reuse of a building that's at least 50 years old.
Right.
Would there be any requirement for reuse of a building at all, or would it basically?
No, I would make it as flexible as possible, so to attract the most potential interest. from private landowners or developers who want to focus on senior housing. And for instance, this last examples down here are fairly small lots. So the old club building, I don't remember what was in there. It's vacant now. It's up behind the, across from the senior housing across the street. It's our zone R5 now. It's right north of 152, which is on our agenda tonight, on Fishkill Avenue. So that's a 1.2 acre site.
Is that the Masonic Temple?
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I know
It's
a
next to
former
the,
club building,
next to
but
the temple, next to the Hebrew temple?
Yeah. next
Yeah, it's
to
a
the
Masonic,
temple.
it's a
Yeah.
Masonic lodge.
So it's vacant now,
Yeah.
and it has a nice prominent slot. It's close to Main Street. It's across from senior housing already, so it wouldn't be out of the neighborhood, So you could put either 20 or 34 units up there in theory if you had the ability to do so under the zoning law.
I'm a little confused about what this whole procedure is. I mean, are we talking SROs, going back to doing that?
No?
Okay, so these units are then for seniors that can get around and do things, so,
Well, they could be either for active seniors, people who want to downsize and live in an independent living apartment. They could be for assisted living. They could be for senior housing, like where there's
With services.
shared meals and nurse available on site and those sorts of things. The way I think Highland Meadows is probably like
yeah,
that.
Highland Meadows, that's, they know what they're doing.
Right.
This kind of sounds to me like we don't know what we're doing, that, we're just proposing to build these things just because we can propose to build them. I'm thinking like, if we want to do affordable housing, maybe it should be mixed.
It
And
could
you
be.
have some of it senior citizens and some of it for families. But this whole thing where you don't really need parking, these smaller units, I'm not saying that they can't live in something small like that or, want to live in something small like that. But I don't really understand the purpose.
Well, the purpose is to provide senior affordable housing, and if you
Yeah.
can change the law by a few tweaks, it's easy to pass. The city is completely control of the zoning law, so they can change the zoning such that instead of one site being available for this use, a dozen or more sites around the city could be available for this use. And they could court it, they could advertise amongst developers who have that sort of interest that they will cooperate in terms of, state housing grants or whatever else to try to provide this sort of housing, which is needed out there. There's a lot of people who would love to
We
downsize.
need affordable housing,
Yep.
especially in Beacon. I mean, every time you turn around, there's something luxury, whatever, going on. There are people that actually work for a living. Not everybody's on a trust fund or, has unlimited income. But I still think that maybe we should be looking to something where you have the seniors on the ground level and families above, so that it's mixed.
Right, you could write that into the law. It doesn't have to be all senior housing.
Yeah.
That's the way it's set up for now.
Well, I think that way you'd also be able to get more developers interested in something.
This isn't the only idea I have if
Yeah.
you stick around. We can
planning
move
to.
on. The first one was about senior housing because it's already set up in the zoning law. And all we have to do is tweak the law so that it's available for more options.
Are they on any kind of timeline for modifying these laws? Have they any stated timeline?
No, they said it was their highest priority. But I don't,
The state is sending,
the state is,
sending.
that's the other reason it should be a high priority is because there's state and probably federal money going to be available for this sort of thing.
Right,
Yeah.
and also it sounds like it's going to be mandated, affordable housing.
Well, that's a touch and go thing with the budget. I don't know if it's going to be mandated, but if it isn't mandated, then there's going to be a lot more money for incentives. So either way, there's going to be money for incentives and some action by the state, I think,
Yeah.
to encourage the construction of housing of all sorts to up the housing supply generally.
So I agree, I feel like the integration of, like, makes more sense, and the little that I've been reading about affordable and senior housing, that it seems to be that seems to be a movement within senior housing, is to have intergenerational housing options. So could we just, instead of isolating senior housing overlay, could it just be affordable housing overlay?
It could be. The council asked me that question, and I said, yes, there's no reason, it's just set up that way. We could do a separate overlay for affordable, or you could just open it up for anything.
Let's hear what else you have, but again, the reason I asked about the timeline is because there are often times when the council asks us for feedback on laws affecting zoning, and, they want to vote on it, like, immediately. In a half-hour workshop, I feel a little pressured that the planning board, because, there's a group of smart people here who have input, that we want to be able to help guide in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
So,
Well, this was supposed to be a preview.
yeah.
So you didn't
okay.
get stuck in that situation.
Good,
But I
okay,
haven't
so that's
I
helpful.
didn't get any direction at the council meeting to go ahead on this, have it for us in 2 weeks, we're ready to roll.
If you
Good.
put this
Okay.
overlay into R1, if you were to put it into all the R1, what kind of, building height, how many stories, what would be the maximum? If you're saying, okay, let's allow more than 4 units per acre, let's allow this overlay to be put anywhere in the R1, what would be the limitations?
Under the current
of-
zoning law, the overlay, the bulk regs are the same, except for the development potential per acre are the same. So you'd have the same setbacks required under that district, the same height standard, so it'd be 35 feet, 2.5 stories. Now, you could change that for the affordable housing. You could go to 3 full stories or
And I don't know-
40
I mean,
feet.
everything really just turns on the density limit, because if the density limit is not particularly high, basically just opened up multifamily development all over the R1 districts, which...
Somehow I feel that wouldn't be very popular.
Yeah, well, that's the reason I asked the
Not only that,
question.
it's really going against, like,
Right.
the comprehensive plan.
Yes.
Not that, but
No,
there,
no, I don't think so.
the reason,
The zone already exists. It's not and the council still, before they could implement this, they could change the law, make it more attractive, and then anybody who came in, they would have to make the case, and the neighbors would have the right to come to the public
Well,
hearing
but
and
that's
say,
a-
we
you
don't
don't
want it
wanna-
next door, or whatever.
you don't want to make the things
That's
dead
part
on
of the reason why
arrival.
the senior housing is more attractive, because seniors are looked at as being less impactful on the neighborhood than
Less rowdy.
multifamily
It
housing
requires,
in
I think
general.
it requires a little bit of thought, only because, and I'm asking the question based on a bunch of stuff I've read about attempts to get multifamily housing built in California in places where there's a massive demand for housing, and the neighbors flip out and lose their minds over anything that looks like multifamily housing. And so I guess I'm concerned that if the restrictions are too relaxed and someone comes in and says, oh, I'd love to do this, and how many units can I put in, how many stories, could I go full 3 stories? That you'll get projects killed by the neighbors who are like, no way, this is like completely out of character with the neighborhood.
The
and you'll
examples
end
I
up-
showed are in a neighborhood where they would blend in. They wouldn't be
Yeah.
out of character. They're not in the middle of a street with all single-family houses on them. They're on main corners. They're surrounded by RD districts. They already have an assisted housing facility on the property, and they could just expand. Those sorts of places are
So
more
just-
conducive.
Just to be clear, it wouldn't necessarily be opening up R1 to all of this. It would be to focus on specific parcels.
Well, not
That had,
No,
no?
you-
Oh,
Not what
okay.
John's saying is let it be
So to be
anywhere in
clear
R1
on
that you
that.
can accommodate
But the
it.
council
The
could
only
still say
limited-
no if they thought that the context was not conducive to it.
Yeah.
Based
So
on the
what-
way this is written now, if you open up the requirements we were talking about, you eliminate that reuse requirement,
It
and
effectively
something happens.
opens
The
it
only
up to
real
all
limiting
R1.
factor here is the
Okay.
density restriction.
No, the limiting factor is before a developer can get going on a project, even if they meet all the criteria in the zone, the council has to say, yes, we will be willing to rezone that property, because there isn't a revolt in the neighborhood, and it is in a good context. It's a good situation where it won't be out of character or whatever. So
Well-
they still have ultimate control to say no.
Yes and no, because the reality is, like with the special use permit thing, once you've got the legislation on the book, the city cannot simply categorically refuse to grant the permits.
For an overlay zone, they can categorically grant to say no. There's no reason, there's no obligation to rezone a property under the law. So they can say absolutely no, this is the wrong spot, look over here, but this is the wrong street. So they absolutely can say no to any rezoning.
You have more?
Yes.
I'm sure we have
Yeah, I
more, but I
should
want to make
try to
sure we
get
have
touch on some other points. Some of the other suggestions: eliminate parking requirements for designated affordable units. So you have a 10% set aside for those units, require no parking. So it's an incentive to provide those and to provide enough housing that you qualify for an affordable housing designated unit. Also lower the multifamily parking requirements citywide. They're leftovers from like the 1970s, when we had, really big cars and there was 3.6 people living in every single family house. Now the persons per household has gone down 25%, but our parking regs are still the same. Why is it that we have a mandatory parking requirement for every use in the city, but we don't have mandatory anything else? You have to have a bathroom, you have to have a kitchen, and you have to have a parking space or 2 parking spaces to get a housing unit. We live in a city where people can walk, they don't necessarily need a car. So many cities across, something like 200 cities across the country, have eliminated parking altogether requirements. They allow the people who build it to come into the planning board and say, this is what we think we need. And if the planning board says it makes sense, it makes sense. Because most of these parking standards are arbitrary anyway. They're left over from either suburban ITE numbers, studies that primarily look at suburban examples, in places without transit, without walkability. So when you look at the cost of a housing unit, something like 17% of a rental unit is the cost for the parking. So they're all over the country, primarily in the South. It's funny that it's in Houston and Charlotte and places where you wouldn't think it. They're allowing housing development to happen without parking spaces. And the people self-select. If I'm going to rent a place in this, I'm not going to get a parking space designated to me for free. And so they attract people who have bicycles or are willing to use Uber or are willing to use the bus or whatever. Now, maybe Beacon isn't ready for that, but you could at least lower the parking standards so that it's a minimum rather than looked at as a maximum.
Yep.
Just like I identified a few parcels where you could put multifamily housing for seniors, the city could identify places where they want to do RD, residential developments that allow multifamily, so that you start breaking up that 90% stranglehold on available land for more than single-family houses. You can make multifamily dwelling in a permitted use in the RD district. Right now, even if you get the rezoning for RD, again, you have to go through a special permit process, which opens you up to them getting a lot of complaints and therefore saying no. So people put out a lot of money for applications and concept plans, and then the special permit allows them, even if they rezoned it, to say no to the special permit. You can allow 2-family dwellings in the R1 district. That's sort of minimalist. There's very little impact of a 2-family dwelling over a 1-family dwelling. So right now, you have to have a special permit and a site plan approval, whereas a single-family home, unless it's in the historic district, you don't have to have anything more than a building permit.
For instances like that, I mean, I can understand on a larger scale development where you don't have owner proximate or owner occupied, that makes sense. For instances like this where you have this mix within dense residential, like a 2-family, what would be the city's requirement on maintenance, repair, safety?
The same as any other multifamily or even single-family
So
home.
it just needs to be enforced. Yeah, I'm just curious, I'm just concerned about specific types of developers who meet the minimum
Well, they
basic
would do that for,
requirements.
there's developers out there who build single-family homes, and they don't have any requirements to do those sorts of things, extra standards.
Yeah.
They don't go to the planning board and need a special permit.
Yeah,
a
I'm not,
public
I'm
hearing.
not saying that. I'm just talking about upkeep, maintenance.
Well, there's maintenance laws in the city right now. If you
Yeah.
don't maintain your property, single-family or otherwise, the city can notify you
Yeah.
that you're not maintaining your property.
I'm more thinking about the occupants of a rental for, with a landlord like that, rather than the impact of the community. It's more, types of landlords who don't care, right?
Well, there's
I
There's
understand.
people who own property who don't care either. I think we have to get away from thinking that all renters are bad.
No, I'm not talking about the renters. I'm
all
actually
single-family
talking
homes
about
are
the.
good. You have to, if
talking
you're
about
going to
the
have
welfare of the
affordable housing
renters.
in a city, you can't have 90% of it locked up in single-family homes.
No, I get that. My concern more is about the welfare of the renters, meaning the safety, the conditions, the requirements for owners and landlords to look after
Well, there
that.
are
rather than
tenant
leaving it.
protections law, both at the state law and can be adopted at the local law.
Yeah. So it's enforcement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We only have a few minutes left. Let me just throw out a couple other options. The city's Main Street Access Committee provided half a dozen places where you could put affordable housing on parking lots in the city, city-owned lots, where they could, just the way they did on West End Lofts, sponsor an affordable housing project on public land. And so there's an incentive to actually do it in cooperation with the city. But the city is overwhelmed with capital projects right now. So they said, we'd love to do these things, but we just don't have the staffing power to do them. So I suggested two places where you could have affordable housing projects, targeted sites for affordable housing, or housing in general, where the city wouldn't be the main player, because it's not on city property, it's on other public property. So, for instance, the county center lot. We've talked about, I think, this before. It's big corner parking lot that's only half used, even on peak days. A real gap in this Main Street streetscape. So what was suggested in both the 2007 and 2017 comprehensive plan is put a building on the corner, frame a green space on Main Street next to civic use, and then consolidate the parking to the rear, and you can actually put more parking on the back two-thirds of the space if you do it efficiently. So here we have 92 spaces throughout the property and 114 spaces just on the rear portions of the property. So the county administration was interested in micro apartments because those are inherently affordable. Those are properties under 300 square feet, real minimal studio type apartments. On that corner parcel, you could put 40 of those in a 3-story building and frame that park, and the developer would be responsible for making the park as well as the building and reconfiguring the parking lot. The green could be designed for the farmer's market as an intro entrance, with tables on both sides as you enter, and then filter back into the parking lot where the more truck-oriented tables are. Could have a bus stop out front, so it starts working with the bus system. So this would be on county property, and I think I could talk the county planning department into running the show and getting county trust fund money to help it go.
It's probably about the 4th iteration of that lot I've seen you plan out over the years. Yeah,
Well,
it's got
it's
legs.
still a good idea.
Yeah.
Since 2007.
Well, we've been going at it for a while.
Right. Well, this time I think the incentive is out there, both from the city and the county. The
Yeah.
county just set up a housing trust fund to fund properties just like this. And this is their own property. It's sort of a no-brainer why would you give money for other parcels when you own one and can subsidize it in
Yeah.
that way?
What was the city's response to this one?
Same as always, it looks like a good idea.
Yeah.
The other main parcel, and I'll just get off on this one, is the north parking lot at Metro North. Metro North was interested in doing a housing project there years ago. They were, and the zoning wasn't in place, so after the 2007 comprehensive plan, which looked at this property's in particular, the city rezoned that for waterfront development and put in a whole design standard for what this parcel would look like with a building on it that's built in a deck over the parking lot. It's built into that hillside, so it would have no view impacts from upland areas. And you could put a number of housing within walking distance of the riverfront parks and the train station. And Metro North, that's on their property, so they would in theory run that process, not the city. But they would do it in cooperation with the city. So we would convince them.
Maybe they could upgrade their station at the same time.
That would be nice. So I think we're over time, but those are some of the ideas that were out there.
Okay, well, thanks, John. Certainly a lot to think about. Do you think this is something we're going to be asked to come back to over the next couple of months?
Well, certainly the Senior Affordable Housing Overlay District
Yeah.
seems to be like a no-brainer, but we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, because we haven't really formalized any kind of response here tonight, so.
No, well, they're not proposing anything yet.
Yeah,
I
so
mean, they
it's
haven't
just-
even authorized me, even though I have a red line version of the overlay district. They
Yeah.
haven't asked me to do it.
Okay.
Can we continue this next month?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
What's that?
If we were thinking we'd continue this next month, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks. Welcome, Judd, sitting in
Thank
for
you.
Jennifer Keenan Bean, our city attorney.
Appreciate it, thank you.
John Clark, our city planner. John Russo, our city engineer. And our group here welcomes you to the, what is this, April? Feels like May already.
It's April.
April meeting of the City of Beacon Planning Board. First item of business, any comments on? No. No. Any comments on last month's meeting notes before we enter them into the record?
I sent in by email a note.
So you have, Amanda, you have, okay, great. So they're updated and ready to be? Yeah, okay. So with that then, I'll accept a motion to accept last month's meeting notes.
Motion to accept the meeting notes.
Motion by Lynn, second.
Second.
Second by Karen, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, thank you. Then that brings us to our first agenda item. In fact, agenda item number 1, which was the 1113 Walcott Avenue, has been held over until next month at the request of the applicant. So anybody here tonight for that application, that's being postponed. So that brings us to, we're in public hearing on an application for a subdivision, 3-lot residential at 44 Kent Street. And sorry, did Jennifer give you a kind of a primer on how we've been introducing? Jen typically introduces our agenda items. If you're not,
No, she is
yeah,
not.
no problem.
But the public hearing has yet to open on this particular application.
Yeah, I was about to say, we still need to vote on the
There's a
secret
secret,
negative.
the first step
Right.
tonight is
Yep.
the secret neg deck, and then open the public hearing.
Exactly. Yep. So we'll get to that. But before then, is there anything you wanted to share prior to our business?
We just, for the record, Mike Bodendorf, Hudson Land Design Engineer for the applicant. We revised the plans per the latest comment letters from the consultants, and I don't think there's any more comments other than some housekeeping items with regard to the easements.
Right. Okay. And then, again, for the board, Judd's mentioned, we have a draft, we authorized draft neg deck on SECRA last month, so that's in front of us to act on. We would do that before we move to open the public hearing. So as far as the SECRA neg deck, any thoughts, comments, questions, or otherwise, a motion to adopt?
Make a motion to adopt a negative declaration, negative secret declaration.
Motion second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Great. And then we'll move to open the public hearing on the subdivision.
3-lot subdivision.
Yep. So I'll accept the
Motion.
motion. Motion by Karen.
Seconded.
Second by Lynn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. And so as far as public comment, we have received some written. Just now, I'm not going to read them, but they have, I'm not going to read them aloud here, they have been made a part of the record. We have reviewed them, so for those of you who have submitted in writing, your comments have been reflected in the public record. And then to that end, we will go to the public for anyone here who has comments they'd like to share. Thank you.
Teresa Kraft. I'm opposed to this proposed subdivision on Kent Street and the request for this zoning variance. This planned subdivision of a single home parcel into multiple lots to build out 3 houses is detrimental to the existing neighborhood and the surrounding area and the quality of life in Beacon, and it will impact our municipal resources. This city is continuing to open up Pandora's box that will forever change the landscape of Beacon. Just because they can change parcels by subdividing them does not mean you should grant them the right to do so. I urge you to please vote no to granting this subdivision. I also suggest that you all watch the City of Beacon workshop meeting mentioned tonight and listen intently and watch the scripted hand signals. There were many. I sat there firsthand. The senior affordable housing is a plan to build 300-square-foot micro apartments the size of a pop-up camper that literally wipes out the zoning work accomplished with a single vote. It's all smoke and mirrors and a potential crisis for the rest of our resources. To say neighbors can come up here before this board and put a kibosh on any projected project are almost non-existent. Can you name me one on a handful or a handful? Thank you.
Sorry, refresh my memory, John. This 44 Kent doesn't come with a variance, does it? No. Thank you. I didn't think so. Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and council members. My name is Paul Hardesty. I'm one of the principals of Hardy Homes. Thank you for considering our request and giving me an opportunity to speak this evening. We are requesting a simple subdivision for 3 small homes where a dilapidated 2-family home currently exists. Our understanding is there may be some concern over noise and safety. In my opinion, it is a stretch to think increasing by 1 family from a 2-family to 3 small homes on Kent Street compromises noise and safety. Our plan includes planting of trees and shrubs. Our family has been serving the Beacon community for almost 100 years and has contributed to making Beacon a desirable city that currently exists. This project is an example of our continuing efforts to support the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I sort of went off my own sort of order, just as far as your review and any additional comments you still have outstanding for the applicant, John.
No, they've addressed all my comments.
Thanks. And Mr. Russo?
We're just waiting for them to submit maintenance and easement agreements.
Okay.
Everything else has been addressed.
Okay. So, yep, go ahead.
This was the parcel that had, I'm sorry, this was the parcel that had Asylum Brook culverted on it. Did that, are we still, is that part of the easement and maintenance agreements that are being resolved?
Yeah, that's one of the easement. They gave us a 25-foot wide easement along the entire length.
And any concerns about management of that? So I mean,
no, because it's actually a 5-foot diameter pipe that runs through that easement. So if there was a need to replace that in the future, 25 feet is more than sufficient to install a new line.
And it looks like within that 25 feet, they're not planning any...
There's no structure.
No structures other than paved area, right? Right here.
Thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I just want to address, and you might have brought this up, one of the written comment letters from the public, and I think was spoken here tonight, is the word zoning variance. We're not going for any zoning variances for this site. It's fully zoning compliant in the R15 zoning district.
Yeah, again, I sometimes ask questions that I know the answer to, just to confirm, but that's the second time I've heard the word variance used in relation to this application, so it has me a little confused why folks would think variance is applicable. It's not in this instance, right? The applicant did not seek a variance with the zoning board. Clear, thanks. Did you have something, John?
Well, I was just going to remind everybody that, consistent with our previous discussion, this is a two-family zone, which is not allowed in the R1 district, except by grandfathering. So this is sort of a non-conforming use that they're trying to create conforming lots out of.
So you're saying the existing is non-conforming, is this existing non-conforming?
Well, it's a two-family house in
Yeah.
an R1 zone that doesn't allow two-family houses. And
So-
it's
so
another
the
example of, in the past, two-family homes were allowed in our single-family districts, but somewhere along the line, they were cut out.
Yep.
And so you have these sort of legacy multifamily and single-family and two-family mixed together. And, you know, the idea of affordable housing is to try to remix the way it was historically, even though in the last 40 years, they've tried to make it exclusively single-family.
So if I'm reading it correctly, right now, as it exists, the parcel is existing non-conforming. The application is bringing it up to current zoning,
Yes.
right? That's clear, okay.
Unless I'm missing something, this is a 150-foot wide lot over 100 feet deep, so in an R15 zone, the basic proposition they're making, cut this into 350-foot wide lots, is an of-right proposition.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. And a pretty standard lot size, 50 by 150. You see this all over the place. Yep. Any other questions, comments around the board? Anyone else from the public?
My name's Harold Holtz, 57 Kent Street. I'm not opposed, but my concern is the drainage. We currently have flooding issues now. On there, you have 3 catch basins in the backyard, two in the rear yards, and then you have the existing sewage draining. Are they going to add anything?
We'll collect questions, and if the applicant is prepared and would like to respond, then we'll do so in turn.
Yeah, I mean, some of my questions are, how's this going to affect us? What are the outages going to be? What are the timelines on the outages? Those type of things. And I'm sure my neighbors feel the same way.
Okay, thank you.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? So applicant heard some questions from the public. Would you like to address?
Sure.
The main question being drainage?
Yes, we are proposing some on-site drainage that will tie into the closed city's drainage network. If I can point to them on the screen here, we have a small catch basin up in the front of the houses and another one in the rear, and we are grading it such that there's a split amongst the lots from front to back. So some of the drainage will go towards the front, some will go towards the back and be collected by the drainage system. In either case, they'll be collected by the drainage system and conveyed to the city's drainage system.
Okay. Sorry, we don't sort of organize this as an exchange. Appreciate you have questions. You're welcome to ask the applicant at, your leisure. But
We did study the drainage area that contributes to that and sized our drainage system accordingly, what's coming to it based on the topography and drainage patterns in the area.
And our city engineers reviewed this. Any thoughts or comments?
And the intent is to get the drainage into the system prior to the main drainage coming down through the main Asylum Brook to more or less beat the peak as far as the water coming through that system.
Beat the peak, what does that mean?
Beat the peak. Well, so basically, if you try to detain and slow drainage going into a system, and you have other drainage collection systems, as they hit a peak coming down through the lines, your peak starts entering in, exacerbates the problem. State DOT also does it. They look at areas, one being 397 we looked at, getting the storm drainage into the system and conveyed through that area prior to the main peak coming in.
Right, that makes sense just in terms of, kind of look at it as like traffic. You beat the rush, right?
Right.
So it's the systems here locally are designed to get out
before the larger volume comes in.
Right, instead of just letting it drain off, drain down into the road, the driveways, onto
Yeah.
the neighbors, the intent is to collect it and get it out of here
Got
before.
it. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
I agree.
Any,
ask a question?
yeah, of course.
Is there an existing drainage issue in the streets with the city system?
There has been flooding in those areas in the past.
Is there anything that the city can do for that?
The city has looked at that in different locations. Part of it is further down in the city, that the city system backs up and then creates a backup all the way through.
We're also planting 25 trees. I think we're taking out 2. So the roots of those trees will help absorb groundwater as well over time.
I don't see 25 trees.
I think it's
They have trees on
5 dogwoods, 7 thujas, 17 thujas, I believe.
Oh.
Sorry, not 25, 22.
Okay.
22, misspoke.
You can't get anything past.
I know, and I wouldn't try.
Not on trees.
Definitely not on trees. Did you have a question, David? Or a comment?
Just the drainage issue. It kind of seems like the only issue I've heard that's pause for concern.
Yeah. Although it sounds like it's.
I mean, is this going to in any way exacerbate that issue?
No, because the intent is to get the stormwater into the system and through the system prior to the other peaks coming into that system.
So it's not going to make the existing drainage problems in the street worse?
No.
Questions?
No.
Yeah.
So, shouldn't we?
Go ahead. Yeah, no.
Shouldn't we be adjourning this and? No?
So the way, at least the way I see it, and help me out here, is that the city may or may not, and in this instance, sounds like it does, have, for lack of a better word, less than well-performing systems outside the locality of an
It's
applicant.
during significant events that the systems back up, and this happens throughout the city in different areas. This is not every storm event that this occurs.
So
Sure, I've seen it. I live here.
And the point to this conversation is, and specifically around this application is the application in any way, shape, or form, it never should, adding to or making worse an existing situation? We understand through the engineering and through our city's review of the engineering that it is not. It's acting to better the drainage system locally, right here,
To mitigate it.
and no single application alone can help solve more citywide problems. So not at the level to rise to stop an application and a review to fix the entire city's problems.
I think, when I said, shouldn't we adjourn this, I meant, shouldn't we adjourn the public hearing to the next meeting, and then hopefully they've got the easements.
I think, yeah, as far as the easements, though, the
That can
easements
be made
are,
a condition of approval.
Yeah.
yeah, the easements are different.
It's just- Yeah, and 2 points. One, keep in mind that part of the neg deck that the board just adopted, that Part 3 addresses impacts on groundwater.
Right.
And surface water, and part of your determination that there is no significant impact is the fact that those drainage concerns will be addressed or mitigated to the fullest extent practicable.
Right.
And with regard to the easement agreements, easy for me to say because I'm here for Jenny tonight, but the type of agreements that we're talking about, I hate to say garden variety, but
Yeah.
we're talking about a maintenance and access agreement for a city line, and for drainage improvements, this is fairly routine.
Yeah.
So I'm not concerned about those in terms of
Right.
the complexity, protracting the board's review or action on this application.
Right, so process-wise, our approval is contingent upon, and
Correct.
it's listed in our approval, that those conditions must be met, the easement being one of them, and won't be signed off by some guy called the planning board chair until they are met. So we have a mechanism for ensuring that those conditions are met.
Okay.
May I ask one more question?
Oh, all right. Of course.
The area drains that they're proposing to put in, is that improving the situation, the current situation?
It's not improving the situation in the road, but it is ensuring that the drainage coming off those lots is going to get into the system and not exacerbate it worse.
Okay, so currently, the lot as it stands now, the water drains into the street?
Into the street and off to some of the neighbors.
Okay.
And the intent was to, let's not send the water onto the neighbors, let's collect as much of it as we can, get it away from the neighbors.
So to some degree, whatever the lot in its existing state is contributing to that problem, it will stop contributing to that problem.
It'll minimize it. There'll still be some coming out, but
Got it.
they're greatly capturing a significant amount of it.
All right. Anyone else? We still have open public hearing. Anyone else? Okay. Discussion around potentially closing the public hearing.
Seems reasonable.
I'll accept a motion.
Motion.
Motion by Kevin. You got there first.
Second.
Second by Karen. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And then, let's see, what else can we do? We can authorize our city attorney's office to authorize draft adoption. So we'll do that. I'll accept a motion.
Motion.
Motion by Karen,
Seconded.
second by Len. All in favor?
Aye.
Anything else we can do for you?
I think that's it.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. With that, we will move to our next agenda item with dispatch, which is our continued review of an application for site plan approval and subdivision, lot merger, mixed-use commercial and residential. I'm not going to read all these addresses. I call it Route 52, but you can give us a little bit more of a
Can do. Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Evening.
Members of the Planning Board, for the record, my name is Taylor Palmer. I'm a partner with the law firm of Cuddy and Fader on behalf of the applicant. Thank you, Amanda, for turning the heat up in here. It is nice and toasty tonight. Tonight I am joined by, I see the gentlemen over here with their sleeves rolled up. I'm quite jealous. Tonight I'm joined by the project architect, R.A. Siegel, as well as the engineer, Mike Bodendorf of Hudson Land Design, and Richard DeAndre of Colliers Engineering is our traffic consultant, but not with us tonight. Our landscape designer is Deborah Adamson. As the chairman mentioned, we are before your board. Let me just make sure. I was making sure I was doing the right application. You had me sideways there for a second on the Route 52 question, and really, that's like kind of saying Walcott in 9D. As the chairman mentioned, we are before you in connection with our continued review of site plan and subdivision, which is the lot merger approval for the applicant's proposal to redevelop the three premises, let's leave it that way, as the three-story mixed-use commercial and multifamily residential development at 397, 393 Fishkill Avenue and 7 Conklin Street. We've reviewed your draft resolution, and we did forward some comments, again, very insignificant changes to the approval resolution, one mostly just focused on the square footage of the building itself. As the board is aware, at the last month's meeting, you did adopt a seeker determination, and there was also the opening and closing of the site plan and subdivision public hearings. Based on our discussions with an abutting property owner after the meeting, who made a comment during the hearing, we did update the landscaping plan to include additional plantings along the northern property line, which is the property line with the neighbor that spoke. We also made adjustments to ensure protection of an existing dogwood tree, which was on the abutting property at the request of the neighbor. We'd also note, and we included this in our submission, specifically Deborah Adamson's, our landscape designer, made reference to the fact that wrapping the evergreens in burlaps actually affects the utilization of the trees in the area for birds to use for food and cover, and it's also a little bit unsightly, so the applicant would utilize organic, non-toxic deer deterrent, because we talked about the types of plantings and the concern that they wouldn't sustain, or so we would, that's our proposal there, is to avoid using those wraps for the trees. It also provides visibility of the evergreens throughout the year, which is, of course, the point of that screening. So again, we're pleased to be back before you. I will turn it over to REA just briefly to walk through some additional revisions, namely to the landscaped area, and certainly any questions you may have.
Thank you. I will note, there is no law that says you have to keep your jacket on.
I'm seeing Karen do it, it might be.
Fact. Breaking the law. Come on. Take it off.
It's too sweaty, he can't wrestle himself out of it.
Why I wear white shirts.
Evening.
Good evening. So, as Taylor mentioned, really the only updates to the drawing were we clarified how that fence works along that northern property line in relation to the retaining wall. And then there's some additional plantings up there to provide screening. But that was pretty much the extent of the changes for this time.
Okay. Our consultants, Mr. Clark, any
They've
items
addressed
of
all my
note?
previous comments, so I'm good.
Yep, great.
They've addressed all my comments.
Wow. 2 for 2. Well done.
I should take my jacket off more often.
No, that wasn't it. Put it
Okay, so we do have, as we directed last month, a draft resolution to adopt. I understand you have had some back and forth putting top and tails on it. City's satisfied with it, this draft at the moment? Yep. So, board, any questions or other comments on reading of this? Otherwise, I'll accept a motion to adopt.
Motion.
Motion by David.
Second.
Second by Karen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Do we have all ayes recorded? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate it.
We'll now move to 536 Main, which is a continued review of an application for site plan approval, 3-story retail commercial, 536 Main Street, submitted by HRSM LLC. Good evening.
Good evening again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Taylor Palmer with the law firm of Cuddy and DeFader. I'm also joined by our project architect, R.A. Siegel, and the project engineer, Mike Bodendorf of Hudson Land Design. As the chairman mentioned, we are before you for the continued review of our site plan, proposing to improve the vacant lot for a 3-story commercial development located at 536 Main Street. The proposed building will host a retail showroom for Warp and Weft, a custom design rug curation business. Following the last appearance at our planning board meeting on March 28th, the applicant submitted revised renderings reflecting the revisions made in response to comments from the ARB subcommittee, and then that was at the ARB subcommittee's March 3rd meeting. You're going to see some pictures, so that's probably what John's eye was just looking at that you haven't seen yet. We only had a limited time to turn around some of the changes because, of course, we met only 2 weeks ago. So we tried to get as much together as we could, and I'll let RA really walk through those in just a minute. RA will please also review the landscaping plan, which proposes to improve the rear of the property with a landscape garden, and we're also adding a John Clark street tree along Main Street. The landscape design works to balance the functional needs of the site and the surrounding area, and it also complies with the landscaped area requirements in the CMS district. We did update our traffic study to consider the additional demand for the development under construction at 416 Main Street. And we did, of course, note that there was adequate parking. In our last meeting, we had an extensive discussion with the board about its unanimous support for the parking waiver. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Siegel to go through those changes. Again, some that you haven't seen, but of course, we'll be putting those forth before the board in our next submission.
Good evening. So, we submitted revised drawings based on the comments we got last time. The main thing was the addition of the landscape plan. So there's an area in the back of the property that's sort of a garden that would be accessed through the first floor retail space. And then there's a retaining wall back there because of the grade change. And then we're landscaping above and below the retaining wall, but on our property. So there'd be a couple different levels of landscaping. We're also proposing to landscape along that easement path on both sides of a paved path. And then, some of that would have to be in cooperation with the neighbor, but we've started talking to them, so we think we'll be able to work that out. The total amount of landscaping on the site is 14%, just of the green area, now that, because of the changes that we made and the addition of the landscaping along the easement area. So we more than comply with the 10% requirement. Oh, yeah, and then there's the street tree, which John noted we need to talk to the committee on that.
The tree advisory committee.
Yeah.
So you have yet to do that?
Right.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, we'll take care of that.
Great.
We showed and submitted some updated renderings, but there's new ones that you haven't seen yet, which will become part of the discussion and the next submission.
So hold on, let me just sort of backtrack and understand. You have spent time with the ARB.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're saying here tonight that since then, you still have new material that you'd like to share with the board?
Right.
And you'll do so next month?
Well, I mean, I have it here, but we'll formally submit it next month.
Yeah, okay. So if you want a quick snapshot, maybe quick, I don't want to get into an in-depth if you're going to have it back next month.
Okay.
And fully completed.
All right. Yeah, and we did sort of want to get your opinion on how you wanted to move forward with the that design review. If you're going to do it as the full board or...
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If,
right.
And of course, it's not just up to me, but let's talk around the board on architectural review. It would be good to move that forward. It would be good to use next month's meeting for a comprehensive final review, right?
Okay.
As opposed to convening the architectural subcommittee again. So if you're prepared for that next month and that works for your timeline, then that's what we'll do. Any objections around the board to that?
Everyone haven't seen, my only objection is that we're kind of like making it this, I'm sorry. My only comment is that you're kind of making a preemptive decision. We haven't even seen the...
Well, you're going to be submitting it before next month's meeting.
We'll submit it before next
We'll all
month.
have the opportunity to review it by next month's meeting.
And then
to, as a group, then give feedback at next month's meeting, and if we're not yet satisfied, have them come back the following month's meeting. I'm not advocating rushing or approving anything until we're ready.
I'm just looking into my magic 8-ball, Mr. Chairman, and the next application may ask that the board consider referring it to the ARB subcommittee, so there may be an opportunity to double dip if the board sees fit, just that way. Because we're going to ask, hopefully, if the board sees fit setting a ARB subcommittee for the 152, 158 Fishkill Avenue project, when we get there, it might be an opportunity for this project to be there as well. So
that's fine. Understood.
Show the pretty pictures.
All right. So the applicant is proposing some additional changes to what we had last month. We reduced the width of the piers on the side, and then sort of like you were saying, John brought them around and made that part of the cornice. We increased the depth of the cornice a little bit, and the cornice is flush with the brick face in this version. You get a couple different views of that. The reduction of the width of those piers makes the break a little bit more than 35 feet. I don't know if you consider this what's the terminology? Major size building or something?
Yeah, major building.
Yeah. So I don't know if the fact that it's a couple of feet more than the 35 when, I think the proportions of the skinnier piers work better than what we had before. But we just wanted to bring that to your attention so we're not skipping that step. But so basically after reviewing it with the applicant, this is what he is proposing.
It says larger buildings, so it's questionable. First of all, is this a larger building? Shall incorporate significant breaks in the facade and roof lines at intervals of no more than 35 feet.
Yeah, we started with a completely flat plane.
Yep.
If you remember that first one, and then we broke it down, but, yeah, we just wanted to bring that to your attention, that it's not.
And by, just, of course, by mathematical reduction of the width of those pillars, we've now created, if this is considered a larger building, which of course is not defined in the code, it would create this delta with 2 feet below the 35 requirement, because we've shrunk the size of the columns where they were zoning, again, our perspective is it's not a large building, so it wouldn't, this necessary break wouldn't sort of meet the purposes. We're trying to make the building more in line with what the board sees as far as being in line with the CMS district and buildings on Main Street, but this code provision, if considered a large building, I would consider a 4-story building, for example, to be a large building. That's just, again, a Taylor reading.
I don't know. Here's the way I look at it. Large, small, scale and proportion rule, right? So to some degree, I mean, what the moves you've made here, just in terms of balance and proportion, look better. The only still observation I'd make, though you brought that articulation across the top, in relationship to the 2 vertical articulations, it's a little thin, right? I see where you're kind of abstracting cornice, and I have no specific objections to that approach. I mean, it's not of the John Clark ilk, but I don't mind it. I like it a little bit of a change up in this idea of kind of taking a little bit of a spin on historic with a modern twist. The proportion of that, though, still, just in relationship to, if you're gonna play with and abstract an element that has a particular proportion in relationship to the rest of the building, by abstracting the cornice, if you will, the scale should also make sense. And my sense is that the scale of that articulation, that cornice on top, is still a little dinky.
Yeah, we understand. We'll bring that back to the applicant.
Yeah. So, but as far as the overall approach, as one board member, I'm in support of it with those refinements. That you do something to help balance the depth of the brick articulation at the top, and then also in relationship to the size of that cornice element. As abstracted, I don't mind that abstraction. Just better scale in relationship to the rest of the. I think it would add to kind of almost elegant balance, right?
I agree. I think that the 2 skinny elements at the top just kind of accentuate each other's skinniness.
Yeah.
Well said.
Are you gonna, will you have like a little, are you gonna end up with a little ledge above the entranceway because of the way at least the way it's shown in the rendering, the entrance, the moldings around the entrance are coming right out to the edge of the face of the facade?
Yeah, I mean, you mean the first floor entrance there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's set back in pretty deeply, and there is that little lip of the the frame that's like the window frames.
So it's almost like a metal insert.
Yeah.
Right. That's still proud of the brick.
Right.
At a certain depth.
Yeah, and that's the same detail as on the windows.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's about the same. And the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what you meant, Len?
Yeah, at the very top of it, there's going to be essentially a bit of a lip projecting right from the facade where the windows are.
Yeah.
And it'll be like a similar depth to the window, the framing or moldings around the windows. And then, is there any thought about, how the brick detail on those pilasters or columns is kind of, right now it's swallowed up by the entrance, the way the entrance is finished. Maybe that's not it's hard to describe it. So where those, on either side of the building, where those simulated columns or pilasters are, on the first floor, there's no brick revealed inside the.
Are you talking about the return where
Yeah.
where it turns metal?
Yes, right
back
there.
in that area.
From there down, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just,
You know, I'm actually, I like the elegance. There's an elegance to it, right? That wide opening is this just nice, you know, sort of metal insert gesture.
yeah, I was just asking whether, you know, revealing the brick at the same projection of the column would kind of like let that element finish itself down to the ground or not.
It's implied that the brick's behind it.
It's right along the facing, you can see it
Yeah.
follows through.
I don't know, if you're asking me, or sort of putting that out there
I'm
as
just
a
putting it out there,
question,
you can respond to it.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary. You know, again, the brick is sort of implied as being behind it, which it's probably not, but I don't personally feel it's necessary. So, and this was my point, you're getting sort of some architectural review here.
Right.
You're almost there, in my view. If you come back having, you know, tweaked those little tweaks, I'm not personally sure it makes sense to go to the full ARB again. We can, you know, that's my point.
You have any thoughts?
Unless you had some sense that it should go to the ARB. I don't know. We're close.
we were just wondering, you know, because last month, it was quite late, and we kind of breezed through this, so I just didn't know where you were with that, you know. But if you did want to send it to ARB, you know, that's one way to do it. If you want to stay with the full board, we're fine with that.
Appreciate that, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, and board, please weigh in.
Do you have any input on whether you would like to see it go back to full ARB or not? Or do you think we're close enough to?
I think it is close. I think it might, one of the things about the ARB that's beneficial is that there's an opportunity to have a back and forth dialogue without, in a smaller setting, right? Where you don't have to, you can speak more frankly because it's not a public hearing. Everything's done publicly, you know, and the approval is done in the public hearing, of course, which is good. So I find it beneficial myself to have that experience. I enjoy it also. I like talking to you about these things. I feel like it does have an impact and it improves the quality of the buildings that you've been doing on Main Street. So if you can, I think that if you had two applications that came at the same time, it might be an efficient use of time, but that's my...
Yeah, no, it's up to you guys. It's another meeting, but if, you know.
Well, I mean, you know, I think we want to, you know, make it whatever's the most expedient so we can get to the next phase of the review.
It sounds to me like if there is an ARB set and you're ready for it, you know, spend the time, get the benefit that Kevin just described. So then at that point, by the time you're back here, we don't have to spend any additional time talking about it.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay. Thoughts, Karen?
Yeah, it makes sense if you know, I think you could get more resolved next month at the full meeting if you tweak it a little.
Take the interim step.
I mean, of course, that depends on who's getting appointed to the
Well,
ARB.
we'll talk about that tonight. Okay, great. So we have a way forward. You're close on architectural review. I'm not sure, is there a meeting set? We have to calendar that, right?
Yeah. Calendar. Yeah.
Okay,
It's gotta be
so
scheduled.
We'll do that offline. Good. Then, I lost track. We're going too quickly. I'm in the last application stuff. As far as our consultants' feedback, Mr. Clark?
Yeah. Main thing was, from my comments, the street tree.
Yeah.
They've agreed to put in a street tree, which is great. They have to talk to the tree committee to talk about type. The tree committee has been sort of back and forth about treatment of the well, whether they want a grate here, and they don't want a grate, they want more natural. So you're going to have to resolve with them how to handle. But from my perspective, you should have a bigger well than what you've shown, and there should be a well detail in the plans. And that the location to me is suspect because it's right under the overhead wires. They come in from the pole to the adjacent building, and it's only 5 feet off the existing light pole. So it seems to me it's going to have to be moved farther south to have any growing opportunity. So those are the two questions. Talk to the Creek Committee about the well treatment put a detail in and look at the location, so it's not in conflict with the wires.
And we'll have Deborah look at it too. Yep.
Yeah. And then, if you get agreement at the architectural review subcommittee before we can move forward on it as the board, you have to have elevations, which you haven't seen yet. We just seen renderings.
Thank you. Mr. Russo.
So we have a few cleanup comments. Also, I will be meeting with the water and sewer superintendent tomorrow morning to discuss sewer connections for the project. A few of the things the applicant needs to clean up. He's waiting for that meeting to occur to get additional information from the city. So they're moving in the right direction at this point.
Great, thanks. So, Board, there are a couple things we can do tonight. We can talk about authorizing Judd's office to draft neg deck. And we can also talk about doing these separately, setting a public hearing, site plan public hearing for next month. Any thoughts on either of those?
I agree to do that.
I also agree that we should schedule a public hearing and start working on that.
So we'll take them one at a time. Any other thoughts or input? So on the subject of authorizing our attorney to draft neg deck, I'll accept a motion.
Motion.
Motion by David.
Seconded.
Second by Len. All in favor?
Aye.
And then on the subject of setting a public hearing for site plan next month, motion?
Motion.
Motion by Len.
Second.
Second by David. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You can now put your jacket back on.
Or take my tie.
Okay. Don't get crazy now.
This has gone way too far.
This is the guy who showed up. I love this. I still razz you for this. Showed up at our Zoom meetings during the pandemic from his living room in a full suit. Love it.
And yoga pants.
And yoga pants. Okay. On to our.
I didn't even hear that. I can't tell you how many hearings I attended during COVID wearing a suit, not necessarily the pants. Well, I'm not saying I wasn't wearing pants. I'm just, you're sitting at a table, you don't need the suit pants.
Yeah, such good memories. Lockdown.
Such fun.
Okay, next item on the agenda. We're gonna continue our review of an application for site plan approval and subdivision approval, mixed-use commercial and residential, 152, 158 Fishkill Avenue, submitted by the applicant. Good evening.
Good evening. Whew, it's hot in here. For the record, Taylor Palmer with the law firm of Cuddy and Fader on behalf of the applicant. I'm joined by this time our project architect, Jacqueline Tyler. Great name, my son's Jack Tyler Palmer. Also joined by our traffic consultant, Rich D'Andrea, who's actually not here tonight, and our engineering consultant, Mike Morganti of Arden Consulting. The applicant is also joining us this evening. As the chairman just mentioned, we are before you for our continued review of a site plan subdivision lot merger application, proposing to redevelop the property for a mixed-use development at 152 and 158 Fishkill Avenue for 16 residential units and office on the first floor. So, at the March meeting, the board did announce its intent to serve as lead agency to serve for the seeker review of the project. As more fully detailed, and as Jacqueline will pull up in just a minute, in our enclosed architectural renderings, we are now proposing an additional, we already had one in the rear of the building, but on the front of the building along Fishkill Avenue, we're now proposing an additional ADA compliant access point along Fishkill Avenue, which will lead to an internal vertical lift. Jacqueline will review that in more detail in just a moment, but given the existing topography of the site, the only other alternative along Fishkill Avenue's frontage would be to develop a nearly 100-foot ramp along the front of the building on Fishkill Avenue, and that's just the physics of getting it there and making it have the appropriate grade and the switchbacks to make it happen.
Sorry, 100 feet at 1 and 12, if I'm doing my math right, that's
86 feet.
86 feet. So you're trying to get up how far?
6.97 feet.
7 feet, basically.
Holy moly.
You looked at lowering the building?
Well, that's effectively what we're doing is going in at the grade, and that's what will be allowing us to bring it, digging into the hill that's in the existing addition, and allows us to bring up the lift from the lower floor. And that also allows us to landscape the area much more so than creating a big front of the building, which is just a ramp. So we did try to provide a more efficient sort of access and ramp, and again, hopefully making a more visually appealing building along the front of the building on Fishkill Avenue. So we did also note in our submission, and we'll get into that in more detail. Mr. Morganti also just touched on the engineering, because we haven't had that presentation yet. But we are looking at the feasibility. Mr. Clark mentioned the concept of land banking some of the parking as well, to try and allow for some additional greening areas on the site as we develop the site plan. So with that, Jacqueline will please run through the adjustments here, and we'll see you in a minute.
Good evening. Again, Jacqueline Tyler with Nexus Creative. I'll keep mine short, and I will let Mike go through the engineering. As Taylor mentioned, and I think I had mentioned at the last meeting, was we had attempted to accommodate an ADA ramp when we first looked at this. And from the corner here, we're sitting about 7 feet, as I just mentioned, below our first floor level. The question was raised if we could reduce our first floor level. We could look at that. However, I want to remind the board that over in this corner, based on this grading that we currently have in the entrance, we have approximately a 17-foot retaining wall in the back. So that means that retaining wall would have to increase in size on the back end. Go ahead.
Quick question. Do you have a section through this site?
I do, yep.
Excellent.
I will pull that up in 1 second. So what we did this time, we looked again one more time the 2 weeks ago to see if we could accommodate the ramp, and again, it was roughly 86 feet long. So that took up essentially from our main entrance all the way over to the corner of our building. We felt it was really important to have a landscape element along the front of this. We didn't want the entire thing to be taken up by a ramp. So we did accommodate about 7 feet down. There will be a entrance lobby from the ground floor, below the ground floor, I apologize, that will contain a lift to bring you up to the main lobby. And that way we can accommodate our stairs here, as well as the entrance located here. I'll flip to the next sheet because I think it's a little bit clearer here. So you'll have your main entrance here, and this will be your lift lobby down below, which will bring you up to the main lobby, accommodating the stairs here. Let me just flip over for you to the section. We did not touch any of the architecture yet from the last meeting, just to give you a heads up. So you can, apologies. So you can see here, the topography, this black line here is our existing grade. So what we've done is we've attempted to keep the building first floor level located at the existing grade based on the placement of it on the lot. And then we've provided, again, this would be a landscape bermed area. This is not updated yet, just so you guys know this section. This was based on the previous application. And we increase our height all the way to the rear, I don't know exactly what it is, it's 10 feet plus.
That helps quite a bit, because it sort of supports what my question was, just with, that I was asking myself, and I'll ask now, with the existing grade, because again, my memory serves, it's as it comes off of Teller, it's pretty flat there. I mean, it's sort of
at the entrance.
Right.
And then if you look.
So this is basically an approach where you're filling from the street level up to an elevation to where you want your quote-unquote main entrance in the back of the building. Right?
Correct. So where you see the white car currently now, that is roughly where our grade is currently. In fact, if you're on site, you'll see that there's the parking behind the blue, the existing blue building. That is the existing grade. So that maintains where it is currently.
So is there any thinking around an approach to siting this in such a way that you're addressing the front of the building, the street side of the building, more as the front facing at that level, and then sort of stepping it up sort of midway through the building, so you have the ability to have kind of an interim, meaning there's got to be a way, because you're filling, as opposed to potentially cutting on the back side of the building, right? My only point being that the approach gives you, or it's creating that problem at the street level to where you need an 86-foot ramp.
So you're asking, can you create a split level at the first floor?
Well, that's one approach, right? Meaning, instead of taking that high point elevation and carrying it all the way across so that you create that 86-foot ramp problem at the street, what are the other, solutions around dealing with that grade change?
As I look at the site, it's 2 buildings. It's very flat on the north end, at the high end where the D&D is. But it's actually goes up quite a bit from the sidewalk on the blue house.
It does, correct.
So I'm not sure that
This is just,
line is indicative of.
it's at one point through the site, correct.
Yeah,
So,
I'm actually thinking more toward where the car repair shop
Yeah,
is
but
right
if you
now.
go to the blue building, which is
It's-
half the property.
it's sitting up high.
Yeah.
It sits up high and
You
you
know,
have a
I
little
get it.
retaining wall along the front. And it
Correct.
goes up, so,
Hmm.
not that I say that it can't. I would think maybe you could at least put some slope into the parking lot,
Yeah,
capture a foot or two of that.
Yeah.
Rather than have a
Yeah,
flat
that-
parking lot, and that would help with the retaining wall too.
Well, I think that, and I think if you do some of the land banking and parking, those 6 spaces in the back, you might be able to shift that building back slightly also.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously, there are other ways to approach this such that the quote-unquote street side you would sort of naturally consider the front of the building isn't ultimately treated just because of the grade issues as it is in this instance as the kind of back of the building, and therefore also the location where, and I understand there's conversation about instead of a ramp, a handicap lift, it's still being treated as the back of the building.
I
right?
think part of what will happen, Mr. Chairman, is we have retained Deborah Adamsons as well as our landscape designer to do a lot of work on this, which you haven't seen yet because we just retained her. So the next submission will also adjust what you're seeing from that side rendering, and we'll have other inclusions. So I think Mike will touch on, I think, the elevation piece of this and what, we just keep adding Mikes and Johns.
Yeah, I get it. I guess the ultimate question I'm asking, we don't have to answer it here, is this more sort of theoretical. Why does the back of the building now need to be the front? And why, and again, we don't need to answer
Well, so that's,
it now.
yeah, we went back
I
to the
wanna
drawing board, and that's
understand
why we went, for Fishkill Avenue, we thought that by proposing the entrance with the lift would allow for the most street frontage. If we did, whether it was by changing the building, moving things around, if we're getting ADA accessibility to the front because of the topography, it really does mean occupying a lot of that frontage with a concrete, physical
Which is
walkway.
Not great.
Correct, which is why we've gone away from it, and we've proposed the simple stair for access, and then we've included the ramp, straight in, and added a ramp at that level so as to open up that whole area for greening and landscaping, which I think will be visualized in the next.
Again, here's my thinking on it. This is a street frontage in a city that you're creating an inaccessible front yard strip that's planted nice. It's nice that there's plantings there, but it's not engaging the street in any way.
Right, we are essentially an extension of the CMS district where we are. We're the transitional district, transitioning between less intense and more intense 3-4-story buildings that front directly onto the sidewalk. So we don't want to set it back 150 feet to, it's not in line with, if we did something like that, I'm sure John would have us pull it up to the front. I think we hear the comments, and I think we need to incorporate them to add more presence, but that's the direction we're going. We only had 3 days to kind of make some shifts from last month. We just want to get your thoughts. Clearly, we didn't get there on this
Okay.
design.
All right.
We'll turn it back.
I'll reiterate. The front of the building feels like the back of the building right now. And personally, in this city, regardless of the district,
Sure.
I'd like to see more engagement of the street, the sidewalk. Yeah, anyway.
Thank you.
And again, it's just me. I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. Everybody here has, their opinion too.
No, and again, we had 3 days to kind of we wanted to, and we got I think it's important, Mr. Chairman, what you mentioned, and we're certainly working in that direction. This is just, again, try to work up something based on the last meeting.
Okay. You have something?
I was just thinking, what if they shifted the ramp to the back?
Which
Or not
back?
the ramp,
Which back?
The hydraulic
Yeah.
lift to the back,
I don't-
so that they could.
We're in the building there. We're in. That comes straight in at grade from the parking lot
Yeah.
for the ADA.
I don't know necessarily how to solve it. All I'm saying is, and again, I'd love to hear from the rest of the board. I understand there's grade issues, right? You got to it's always a design challenge. Right now, as part of a city, This is all residential on the ground floor, right?
Just a gas station.
Oh, it's commercial on the ground floor.
Commercial on the first floor.
Correct.
Yeah, again, I mean, stuff like this, where you have to go to the back of the building to get in, it's just, it's
Everybody
turning
should
its
go look at the
face.
site and see the knob that's already there on the blue house portion of the property.
A knob?
It's a good-sized hill.
Is that a technical term? A knob?
It's-
We'll put some pictures
I
in.
don't-
I
in
think
all my years, I've never,
Sounds good as Google Street View's terrible.
it's usually how
Because it looks flat
how
on
I
the
refer to
DNT
certain
end
people.
of the site where the driveway's going to be, but the place where the building's going to
I
be
get
is actually quite a ways up.
But
So it isn't a fill there, but I agree that everything we should do would be trying to make the front entrance feel like a front entrance.
Yeah, I get it. It goes up, right? And you're going to great lengths to fill to meet that, right? So, and again, I'm not going to argue the merits of filling as opposed to cutting, but there's also the option of cutting. But anyway.
So that's a good segue for me. My name is Michael Morgante. I am the engineer for this application. It's before the planning board. Just to give the board a couple of things to think about too as it relates to the site. Interior grades are a lot of times they're set by what the elevation is at the road as you enter the site. And in this case, I think our elevations near the road, our existing grades about elevation 145, and if you look at the existing conditions plan right here, the building's almost 10 feet higher, first floor elevation than the road currently right now. It's a little over 9 feet. So I was just at the site now before I came to the board, to this meeting, took a bunch of pictures, just from my own knowledge again. There is a little wall in the front. It's kind of deceiving. It doesn't actually look like it's up that high, but it actually kind of is up that high. In terms of reducing elevations within the site, there's the potential for me to take a look at shaving this down a little bit. But again, it's that existing grade at the road that kind of really forces my hand on what I do for elevations inside the site. If I drop the elevation of the rear of the building, I then lessen the percentage grade from the driveway that would connect back down to the road. And that's not a bad thing, but I have to look at my grades to make sure that I keep proper grades for drainage purposes. So I don't want to design a parking lot that's less than 2% grade to make sure water's flowing and kind of moving around in there.
All of that makes sense.
Yep.
They're descriptive, indicative of the grade challenges you're finding on your site.
Yep.
There's solutions there that are more elegant and I think better than what we're seeing right now, that's all.
Yeah, and we can revisit that. But moving the building back would be quite difficult because we've pretty much wedged in the parking that we've got shown there right now. So I don't really think moving the building back will help the site in terms of a parking layout.
I'm not sure anybody's advocating moving it back.
Okay, I thought I heard somebody say it.
I mentioned somebody shifting it back, if they were to land bank the 6 spaces in the back, if that would help with what's occurring up front.
It's also a very long building.
Yeah,
You
it's
could
extremely long.
You could step it, and that would actually perhaps help with the aesthetics of the
You're exactly, sorry
facade.
to interrupt. Right, you have,
The building's wide enough.
along the long facade, you have this going on, right?
I'm sorry, repeat that, I was right.
Along the long face, along the
Yes.
street face, you have this basically going on. You have high point and low point, right?
Yes, on the ends, yeah, they would be high, in the middle would be low, yeah.
And to Kira's point, it's a very long building.
Correct.
A way to use that to sort
To
of
your
modulate and articulate, right? Break things up a little. And the same goes for the height going front to back. You know, you have the ability to do, as the architect described, a split level, right? How would that work? Again, we're not going to solve it for you, but what we're saying is, again, I started with that we're smart people. This is a design problem that has many solutions, many possible solutions. This is one of them, and again, we think it needs a lot more work. And I know you understand.
I'm just taking out that 8 ball that I had out earlier, and I think a good thing would be to hopefully request referral to the ARB subcommittee to
Sure.
have some of these communications so that we can try and start getting the facade in a better position or the building frontage to really
Yeah.
emphasize the front.
So what you're saying is you're tired of hearing me go on and on about it. You'd rather take it to a smaller group.
No, and I will also bring Jacqueline back up. She does have some pictures, but that, we'll leave it with that, because
Yeah.
again, more is
Fair.
to come, but I think it would be helpful, too, to bring this to the subcommittee to get a lot of that sort of,
Yep, agree,
in
okay.
the weeds.
Yeah, I just wanted, and again, we have not adjusted any architecture, but I understand that there's questions in regards to our overall height and the positioning, so I just wanted to clarify this here, right? So this blue, you can see the blue building it does have exposure along the front face. What we have done currently is maintain and utilize the existing grades. We hear what you're saying about looking at other options, but I wanted to put this in front of you to clarify what John was saying, that this portion is flat over here in front of the auto body. And it is fairly flat here, but the residence is situated up on a knoll, as you said, up on here with the parking located in the rear.
Oh, you said Knoll.
He likes that better.
I thought you said.
Oh,
Knoll.
sorry.
Oh, it's not.
Sorry, Knob. Sorry.
Do you prefer Knoll?
Knoll, Knob.
Grassy Knoll is better. I've never heard a landscape.
Grassy
term
Knoll's
knob.
bad. That's like JFK assassination. But Knoll by itself is kind of halcyon, pastoral. It's nice, right?
So that, we understand what you're saying, and we'll look at the architecture, see what we can do there.
Great.
So.
So yeah, I think, yeah, if the yet-to-be codified architectural subcommittee feels it's a good time to put this on the calendar for review, we already have another architectural review, so let's do that. Do we usually act on that? Forgive me, I forget.
The grading too, I don't know if you want to about the grading.
Yeah, we usually vote
Yeah.
on referring to the
So, all right, good.
architecture review subcommittee.
Thanks. I'll accept a motion then to refer this application to the architectural review subcommittee.
Motion.
Motion by Len.
Second.
Second by Kevin. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. What else would you like to discuss?
I think the only other thing, Mr. Chairman, is we're coming to a point where we'd like to discuss that the application does require a height variance based on how the code defines calculating the building height, not a story variance. That was previously reviewed with the building inspector, and we do require a variance for height for the retaining wall.
So not the building height, but the retaining wall height?
Retaining wall height and the building height, the two, so there's a how many feet? Two and change on the building height itself, by the way, where it's calculated from.
Would any of this conversation about what we just talked about help you to alleviate the need for either of those variances? or
It
one
will
of them?
worsen it, I believe,
It
from
will.
right off the bat, so.
We're not averse, if it ends up being a better design, that's the purpose of some of these things.
Not necessarily if you step
Spoken like a
it.
true lawyer.
Not all
Wow.
zoning can fit every property.
I guess it would worsen the wall
Yeah,
problem.
it will worsen the
but
wall.
lessen the building height problem. Because if you brought the building down
stepped it.
towards the street, it's supposedly the ground floor level along the street that you measure from. But I don't know.
Okay,
I
yeah,
don't
well,
understand why you need the building height. I mean, you're close, why can't you just make it work?
Yeah.
Save yourself the headache.
John's asking, he's saying we're close on the building height, why can't we make it work? And I think we have to relook at that, but I'm just, I guess effectively looking to your council just as far as process or how the board wants. We're not pressing anything forward, we still have to meet with the ARB subcommittee, want to have the building in a position that we'd even want to go, and you have to complete the secret process as a coordinated review before the zoning board could ever act. There could be some parallelness with the zoning board, because no matter what, the retaining wall is going to have a variance need.
Can I make a point?
Of course.
I think that you could avoid the request for a variance if you made it in two lifts and you worked with a structural engineer to get, or someone who did what's called supportive excavation work, right? To see if the wall that you are actually proposing is physically possible. Because it doesn't look like something that would make sense either economically or structurally, right? Those retaining walls that high are incredibly expensive to build, right? And it's much less expensive. You're already overparked. I would suggest that rather than pursuing a variance, for a situation that's not in the best interest, I think, of the public and in this building even, that you examine using a different type of retaining wall and bringing it in, lowering it down, and using that, using what might be an overparked situation as an opportunity to remove some of the parking.
Just note, one thing that's been outstanding on this for a while, certainly since the last meeting, and I know Mr. Russo had noted it, was doing just that, doing boreholes and looking into the feasibility of this.
If I can make one comment to that point. So I've zoomed in a little bit on this section of the site plan here, and at the end of the day, I just want to remind the board that our elevation in the parking lot is going to be 150, 151, 152, whatever it's going to be. Whether I can lower it or not, I'll do my best. That's not going to change the elevation of the wall in the back. It may give me an opportunity to step a wall if I were to remove parking spaces, but technically that wall's still 16, 17 feet high. So it doesn't preclude us, I think, from a variance, but it may provide a better visual impact for the site. I'm not so sure it'd ease maintenance or circulation for us, but we could take a look at it.
So you were about to ask us to refer you to the zoning board, no? Okay. So
No, I think it was just a point of information, Mr. Chairman, just on how the board, if it's something, once we come to a point, hopefully at the next meeting where we have a building design after the ARB review, where we might be in a position where this is the layout of the site, maybe we do, show the tiering that Mr. Morganti just mentioned of a retaining wall, wherever we're at, how does the board want to handle that process of referral, and at what time would that be appropriate for this application?
My 2 cents? I want the applicant to get to the point where, as a cohesive application, things like the parking, the wall, the siding, all of this are understood, feasible enough for the zoning board, because we don't want to send something up to the zoning board that they then have to ask you a ton of questions on either. I think, and I don't know, I'm speaking for the zoning board, but that approach should be as tight as possible and as close to what you're planning to do, and as far as a realistic approach as possible. So,
That's the board's decision as to when. To me, just sitting here, it seems that if the project design is going to be refined through the ARB process, why don't you at least take that step and see what occurs?
It's a little early.
Yep. We have, we have a little ways to go.
The ARB doesn't really, the AR subcommittee doesn't really look at any site planning issues. So the retaining wall is something that has to be handled by the full board. It's only the architecture that's handled by the AR.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things that have to happen still yet. One's ARB. And again, the review of the ARB will, to some degree, be impacted by what's happening as far as the siting and what's happening as far as, how you're resolving the parking.
I think you've collectively answered my question. I appreciate it. We were just looking as a point of information that the board, when it's at a position that's comfortable with the layout functionally, would be the appropriate time. The only reason why we ask is that at some point we believe we'll need to go to the zoning board, whether it's just for one or another variance, or if the building design is adjusted to reflect these comments and changes one of those two, that we'd like to try and at least be at the zoning board in some level of parallel track. The only sort of holdup will, of course, be the secret determination at a future date.
Yeah.
From a decision, I should say, not from appearing at the zoning board.
Taylor, you were looking to land bank 10 spaces additionally, I believe, so I think that's going to come into play as far as where you're going to be looking to land bank those spaces. If it's in the area of this wall,
They could terrace.
you can terrace that out.
Yeah, the problem is, with land banking, you actually have to physically have a viable space.
Get to them if you need them, right?
The other option on the table is a shared parking deduction. We said, well, 2 spaces is fine for shared, and then we'd land bank an additional. But you could do a larger shared parking arrangement, and then you would have the room in this corner to maybe curve that wall and terrace it so that you
I'd be all for.
Needed a lesser variance.
Yeah, I'd be all for.
Or there might be some combination of all of these things.
Seems to be better than a 17-foot.
Yeah, I would be in support of that. if it goes to mitigating this idea of a giant wall.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
3 tiers at 6 foot each.
Yeah, one of the things I was looking at here just now that the board might want to take a look at with me is from where my mouse is standing right now, where this tree is proposed, if we took out a bunch of these spaces, these about 4 spaces right here and like 1 or 2 on this side, you could end up with a nice catty-cornered stepped retaining wall, and your loading dock would, or your loading area, I should say, would blend in nicely against that wall. I could probably find a spot for refuse in that location. I think it would take care of a lot of the visual impact that the board's concerned about.
Yeah.
It would minimize thicknesses and sizes of walls. It might look more appropriate for the site. We'd fall deficient a little bit more on our parking requirements, but if that's something we can work with the board and the city, then I think we would be...
It sounds like there's an avenue for that. At
Yeah,
least this board
correct.
member is in support of that. I'm happy to hear from the rest of the board around
Well, the other thing
that
is with the
that
testing
approach.
that has to occur there. I mean, I have a feeling you're going to wind up hitting rock.
No, we did. We actually did stormwater testing throughout the whole site last week. We actually tested that corner. We got down about 5, 6, 7 feet, still didn't hit rock, actually. Yeah.
So
I
it's
was
just a whole bunch of
surprised.
dirt.
Sorry, say
It's
that?
just a whole bunch of dirt.
It's a whole bunch of dirt. It's actually a fine sand with a little bit of silt.
Easy to bring it to the street grade.
Actually, good time for me to ask Mr. Russo a quick question. So we're less than an acre, so I don't necessarily need a full SWIP, but we're going to be looking at some kind of...
We're going to be looking for you to do something. You're recently incurred
Yes.
on the site by 3 times.
Yep.
So
Yeah, pre versus post at the very least. Okay.
We good? Anything else around the board? Questions for the applicant or thoughts about this approach toward, the applicant's considering, limiting, reducing parking for the effect of, mitigating this giant wall?
At least for me, it's hard not to draw the observation that, before we even opened up this discussion tonight, we're already being asked to effectively excuse them from part of the parking that would otherwise be required, and that may well be justified. They're also asking for a retaining wall that's higher than is otherwise allowed, and for a variance for building height. And what we're hearing is that some of the concerns with the retaining wall would be addressed if there were fewer parking spots. If the building wasn't as high, they wouldn't need all these variances, period. It's kind of hard for me not to draw that observation.
Right, why not look at reducing the size of the building so that it could fit on the lot appropriately?
That's how
I
the
don't
conversation
know.
is trending.
Obviously, none of us can speak for the zoning board, but I think a building height variance is a touchy subject.
It really is. It's the
in the
third rail.
city.
Not to speak for your old board, but you know them best.
If you can manage without the building height, I think the retaining wall would be a little easier for them to stomach.
Yeah, I think
That would be my guess,
we have-
but I don't know, it's just a guess.
I just, I hate to be beat that dead horse, but we did try and put this together in a couple days to try and address those comments. So we have some work to put back into this. We're by no means saying see you later.
What's the delta on the building height?
And this is, by the way, not the maximum density of the site by any stretch. We're well below the density that's permitted here. So just want to make it very, very clear.
I love how you always take and turn it to the positive, right? We didn't do exactly what the, zoning allows, so aren't we great?
They're trying to crucify.
I actually, sorry, their plans kept crashing my iPad.
Anyway, what else?
That's it for tonight, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the questions. We'll come back. We'll meet with the RBD. I think we'll listen in for who is fortunate to be appointed this evening, and then what date we might set for the subcommittee meeting.
Good segue to our next agenda item. Thank you. Miscellaneous business, appointing planning board members to serve on the Architectural Review Board Subcommittee. We have a resolution appointing planning board members to serve on the Architectural Review Subcommittee, which I'm sure, especially for those of you who are nominated, have reviewed. And those who have been nominated, are you aware of this?
I am.
Kevin Byrne, one of our most senior ARB members, to a new 2-year term, expiring April 2025. Leonard Warner, Len, seasoned ARB member, and Ms. Karen Kiana. You would be a new member.
upgraded from alternate.
That's right, you were an alternate. So it's not, you're a rookie, but you have experience. You know what you're doing. So we have this resolution. I don't think we need to read the whole thing. Any conversation around the board, or otherwise a motion to adopt this resolution for these 3 ARB members to serve 2-year term?
Can we motion ourselves?
I'll make the motion. Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations.
Yeah, what was I supposed to say, better them than me?
I'm sorry?
Was I supposed to say better them than thee?
Hey, look, it's an honor.
It's an honor to be nominated.
It's a great honor.
It's a lot of fun, actually.
I did my time 100 years ago. It feels like, oh, you're leaving. Thank you very much, Jed. Very nice to meet you. Thanks for spending the time. And you got off really easy tonight.
Oh, my God, you drew the good straw.
Yeah. It's John Seaver. Okay, I know I've seen the name.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Have a great evening. Safe drive home. Okay, so that brings us to architectural review.
Kudos to the planning board attorney for keeping a jacket on the entire time.
Thank you. Yeah, he's sweating under that.
The only thing I wanted to note is that the first architectural review is on the building, I can't remember the name, 456, I think it is,
Warp and Weft?
Main Street.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, if you look at the streetscape along that entire block on that side, it's the only storefront that hasn't been restored to a sort of more traditional
I know.
format.
I know.
And I'm sure that the person coming here is leasing the building and doesn't have control over that, but it'd be nice to put a jab at the owner to say, it'd be nice for that one to be consistent with the neighbors.
Yeah.
Sweet.
I'm going to speak honestly.
Can you,
There are instances where, for continuity and for historic, it makes sense to hew a little bit closer. In this instance, for some reason, it doesn't bother me, and I like the sort of change up because there is, a little bit of monotony if you think about it. As lovely as all of the buildings are on Main Street, the historic buildings, I kind of like the surprise of the break of monotony, especially.
Like that residential door that looks like it's, at any rate.
Wait, John, can you, I'm not sure. I think I missed. No,
No.
yeah,
Oh.
please,
I'm talking about
just
the-
reiterate, please, because I didn't.
456.
So 456, hang on a second.
456, which is coming before you next on facade and sign.
Oh, here. Oh, geez, I'm totally off.
Yeah, hang on a second.
And it's not even
It's
that
not
late.
coming up for me.
So we have a sign for 456.
And a paint color.
And colors.
Yeah. I'm just noting that when you look at that
Forgive
block,
me.
that's the only one that sort of sticks out as having a,
It's like almost
sort
like
of
a.
1970s storefront.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if
I don't even have a picture here.
I can show you.
But they're making
At
it
least the
look
street
so
view.
much better.
Oh, here it is.
Well, they're
The
painting
sign on
it.
the facade in the next image?
Christopher Stella Gallery.
They're not changing the window or the residential door, which really is pretty odd looking on that street.
those are just the colors.
Oh, yes,
See
I've
it.
always hated that door.
Why is mine
There you go.
totally different? I have a totally
Hold on a
different.
second, let's get to
Sorry, I was
the
thinking, I was on the-
facade
All
here.
right, there we go.
So
Oh, that looks
although
nice.
what they've submitted looks
What
like
happened
they
to
are
Bed Bath and, oh, they go next door.
Yeah,
Anyway,
the door.
I'm assuming, thank you, John.
Wait,
I'm sorry, I was
No.
completely
Yeah.
on a completely different topic, so.
Like,
Yeah, we can-
slightly used.
We can ask because
Door.
Yeah.
It
the-
turned out to be like some sort of
That's right.
eBay space or something, where they were showing things in the window, but it wouldn't
'Cause
have,
they
didn't have
are-
hours.
They're not, this is existing.
It was annoying.
No, but look at they're proposing some columns and a new door, it appears, right? So we can ask
I
them.
remember walking by there. but-
I never, you couldn't walk in, it was just
Really?
in the window.
Thank you,
and I
John.
thought they were selling it,
I mean, from this, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so we've spent a little bit of time pre-reviewing this. This is certificate of appropriateness for 456 Main.
So what he's saying is that, sorry.
Thank you for interrupting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But if you have questions, let's first hear from the applicant, and then is the applicant here, 456? Hi. Come on up. And then let's ask those questions in context of this review.
Yes, hi. Joe
Hi.
Logiato. So my intention is obvious to just kind of spruce up that facade and make it more in keeping with the rest of the block. rest of the street and give it a bit of a, more of a classic style.
So we have a couple questions. It's a great building, and you heard some of them perhaps, but we'll sort of take them in order. As far as the facade, are you doing anything to replace or otherwise upgrade the door?
The door itself?
Yeah.
I wasn't going to. I can do that. I was more concerned with that, kind of like the green wood that's existing there now, and replacing that with or working over that with a, more classic style molding and so forth, and some, palisters and corbels and so forth.
Yeah.
I mean, the door certainly, I get it. That can be replaced as well.
I'll put it bluntly, it's ugly.
Yeah, but so was the rest of it, and I thought, well, let's take care of the, the larger area.
Yeah.
But yes, I could replace the door as well.
Yeah, I think, to something a little bit more in keeping with the sort of traditional
Yes,
nature.
sure.
Yeah, so if you're willing to do that, great, thank you. We'll take that into account in this review. So I'm just curious too, the color, you've got sort of a rendering.
Yes.
Here of the facade with the Christopher Stella Gallery sign in and amongst what looks to me to be new sort of wood.
Yeah, do we need an
trim
actual
elements.
drawing for this? Because it looks like we've got a cornice here above the sign, the columns, there's
Yes.
a bunch of things going on. So is this actually, this is more than just a facade repaint and a sign application? This is
It's
like
very
a-
shallow. I mean, it's the corner, we're speaking of,
Right,
a
but I
matter
mean-
of inches here. It's not like a large, very, 2-foot depth kind of thing.
Well,
But
here's-
there is a kind of cornice that is, now there is like an existing beam, a piece of wood going across, and the cornice would not really stick out much more than that. Just be more decorative and more classic in molding style.
Right, but I'm just saying, kind of working off a rendering, there's more than just a, this isn't just a repaint and a sign. Do we need?
No, it looks like there's a
something
lot of applied material here.
for a facade redesign? Do we need like a building department review for beyond what we're doing right now?
That's a good question, Bruce.
Can you come over for a second? Can I show you? I'd like to, because I have it up on my screen, and I can show you what's happening.
So you can understand our conundrum. So there's a certain amount of application of what it looks to be, architectural elements to the front of this, right?
Yes.
As opposed to just, usually in certificate of appropriateness reviews, we're looking at simply, paint colors applied to an existing situation.
Yeah, but I mean.
And in the case of signage, it's very specific, right? We're just looking at the signage. So the question that Len's asking Bruce is, to the extent to what it looks like you're sort of attempting here by applying elements to the face of the building, is that more of a building department thing that we want to approach? So Bruce, what is your determination?
It's obviously going to be something that's going to be applied to the front of the building.
Yep.
So it's just an attachment to the building, more or less. I don't think it's really structural changes.
So not a permit.
No, absolutely.
It's basically just trimming out everything, but it's going to give it some depth.
Okay.
Correct, and let's keep in mind, yes, exactly, it's more applying some additional molding to what is already existing there. But we're speaking of maybe 4-6 inches tops.
Yeah.
So it's not like a structural thing, adding a lot of
So
structural,
again,
elements to it.
Understood. I think, again, it raises the question, what does this look like? What will this ultimately look like, right? Because I appreciate the submission, but from this illustration, it is not clear in terms of the detail and how this will ultimately end up looking.
Mm-hmm.
It's not clear.
What would make it clear?
Like, do we need to know the dimensions that this is going to project out from the existing facade with the
Yeah, I mean,
columns and
it would be useful from our point of view to see a scale elevation, right? One that was drawn to scale in relationship to the scale of the building, right, as opposed to a photograph with what looks like elements photoshopped that aren't necessarily to scale. It's very hard to see when, for example, you're representing the columns here.
Right, are they square in cross-section, are they cylindrical? I mean, you could guess, but you
Exactly.
can't tell exactly from this drawing. And what
It could
material
also-
are they?
It could also be possibly just noted, like all of the dimensions of the trims that you're
Yeah.
applying.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Something,
like a column,
Right,
like
yes.
your column is like,
something a little more specific, right?
8
Okay.
inches in diameter and projects whatever.
Yeah, and then, typically when you see things like this new cornice element, I understand this idea of, it's not going to protrude that much. It's not one of our deepest concerns. It's more like, what's it going to look like? I'll tell you this, whatever you do is going to look better than what's there already. Right
I was
now.
going to say that, but I was trying to be polite.
No, it's absolutely.
But again, you got to
That's
understand.
understood, but
Our
I mean.
charge is, it's
But
really
can I-
hard for us to say, just looking at this, yeah, we can approve that, because it's really hard to tell what
And would
it
you,
is.
I mean, were you?
Right.
I think, I don't know if I agree with that, but you're the
As
man,
reader-
so I guess I'll agree with
As the
it.
reader, I'm telling you, it's very difficult. And as the body, and who knows whether my fellow board members agree, as the body approving this, from my position, I can't confidently approve something that I can't understand and I can't read.
Okay.
So,
And, I mean, just out of curiosity, were you planning on doing this work yourself, or were you going to have a contractor do this? And I guess I'm asking to kind of,
I'm going to have a contract. I was hoping to get a permit to do
I
that.
know why you're asking.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just, to kind of turn your comment back on you a tiny bit, are you going to let the contractor just, build it off a napkin sketch, or are you going to, and that's what I'm kind of saying is like, this is kind of the equivalent of a kind of, reasonably well-done conceptual idea. Hey, I'd like, a cornice, I'd like some columns, but if I would,
Good point. If I were, any good contractor would say, okay, give me some drawings that I can.
like,
build
what am
from.
I, if
Scale
I was a
drawings.
contractor, I'd be like, okay, what?
Well, I'm going to be working with the contractor, so.
But I think you obviously, if I asked you, you'd probably say, yeah, obviously I need to tell the contractor more than what you can just glean from this drawing. We would want the same level of detail that somebody could actually go and execute it.
Okay.
And again, our point here isn't to deter you or, because it's good that you're looking to improve the facade of this, but we wouldn't be a responsible body if, based on what we see here, and knowing what we know about the fact that you're looking to add elements to it, and we appreciate your patience with us, but it's very challenging for us to really get a good sense of what this will ultimately look like.
And to be
So
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to, help streamline the process and, knowing that you could go to the Dykes catalog and say, this is the molding that I'm going to be using, in this position. You could kind of give us the list of parts that you're using.
Would that suffice?
I know Dykes, you know Dykes catalog?
Not very well, but I know of it.
It's like a woodworker's wonderland, right?
What materials were you planning to construct? Was this all wooden construction, or?
No, it's, I think it's listed as a PVC.
It's all
It'll be
fiber,
painted.
so it's all fiberglass
That's a
elements.
little different.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Of course,
saying.
if it's not wood, it's something, molded from a catalog.
Right, that's what I'm saying, like you.
So,
picking
yeah,
it from a
that,
catalog.
that level of detail would be really, really helpful.
Okay, so then I have to update and submit it for the next meeting, I suppose, correct?
Yeah.
Well, what can I do to that facade in the meantime? Paint it? Is that acceptable?
Depends on what color you want to paint it.
I was thinking of bright pink, no. I have colors, natural brown. It's a Benjamin Moore natural brown color. I think I have a sample there.
Yeah, and again, I'm not sure how much the city shares with folks like you in advance of coming here. We usually like to see it physically.
See?
The actual paint chips.
Oh, I have it here if you like
have
this.
it? Oh, good. So you do that. Let's look at it. So your plan would be in the interim,
Excuse me?
your plan would be in the interim between
Yeah,
now and
yes.
next meeting to apply a color?
Well, yes, I might as well paint it, yes.
Yeah, let's see the color. We can ostensibly approve the color tonight. That's something. No objections. At least in my-
Here's your, it's probably not dissimilar.
Close to
for
that. It's a little more like a rust, but.
Um,
You got one in support, two in support, three? What? Wait till we're done here.
So, yeah.
Yeah, you're proposing just to paint what's existing, this bluish green? You're going to just
What is green, I would paint that color.
Yeah.
And you can then supply it with another.
Great.
What's about,
Can I suggest one thing? Just when you make another stab at the facade, I think you'll save money and also make it look simpler and better if you frame the window with the columns, right, and have the door as a
Hang on,
separate panel.
sorry, Kevin, we can do that. We were talking about paint. So
No,
let's.
I know. I
yeah.
thought we'd approved it.
No, we hadn't.
Okay, good.
Oh, okay, sorry.
We hadn't acted on it yet, so. I appreciate that you want to, further help the applicant just in terms of an approach, but I just wanted to get through the subject of the paint. So if you're asking us in the interim, and this is how we'll approve it, to paint the existing green areas, the color you just submitted, would that include the window trim and the door trim and the door?
the door itself.
Yes.
Okay.
The window trim is white now, is that what it's?
Yep.
Yes.
And the door trim is white and the door is blue. Would you
Yeah.
be looking to paint everything?
Okay, so this would be an approval to paint in their existing state all of the areas of green, the white window trim, and the blue door.
Is that brick under there, or is that more?
Sorry,
chipboard?
I'm in the middle of.
I know, but it's important, it's relevant to this. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Presumably the white door.
the last question I have is that the green below the storefront window, is that painted on top of the brick, or is that another piece of particle board? I'm sorry, I can't just, it looks, I guess it is another piece of particle board. It is. All right, I've answered my own question, so yeah, sorry. Everything green.
No problem.
Yep.
So, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, and then, just for the record, if you wouldn't mind giving Amanda that color, the color number? No, just the number. Benjamin Moore.
2103-10. Benjamin Moore, Natural.
Thank you.
2103-10, Benjamin Moore. I'm just saying that so it gets recorded.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We appreciate your patience with us and
All right, so now
your
we're going to go back to
understanding.
the structural in a second? We're not done yet.
Yeah, so, I'm sorry, Kevin had some suggestions for you. So, Kevin, if you wanted to move on to that.
I don't want to go into too much length, but when you look at the proposed design that you had,
Yes.
it's actually, there's a lot going on, right? It's actually a small facade, and the first thing I would do is I would look closely at the rest of the adjacent buildings.
Yes,
Because
I have.
one of the things that John had mentioned, and I think it's right, is that this is one of the most intact and decorative blocks in Beacon, and people really are so fond of this town, and as you are, that's why and you want to do a beautiful building. And I don't want to over design it for you or anything like that, but I think that simplifying and using thinner verticals, right? All you have to do, I think, is trim the top, right, with a type of an appropriate, and I think if you looked at the other buildings, there'd be a similar sort of cornice above the glass, right? And then most of these doors have incredibly simple, thin columns between where the doors are and where the windows are, right? So if you're going to have to rebuild this when you do it, right? You're going to need it. I'm assuming it's a new piece of glass. Am I right? Or
It looks like from your,
The
I wasn't planning on changing the glass. The glass.
Oh, you weren't?
Okay, because in your...
Trim out the existing.
You know what
The
the...
window was not altered in this design.
Oh, okay.
Hold on a second.
Just
It's just,
walking around it.
and see, this is another reason why it would be really helpful to have a scale drawing, because from the, if you look at the existing facade and then look at your rendering, it looks like the window is, I don't know, maybe it's hard to tell. Maybe it's just the sign is really, I guess the sign is what's taking up most of this. So the glass is staying the same, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
Again, I think for a little bit of guidance in terms of your coming back next month, more detail on what specifically you're looking to apply to the
like a
facade.
side.
And it being in scale and in relationship to, the actual, right? So,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Thank
as-
you.
Yep.
And
Just
then,
a-
so, I'm sorry, we have your sign as well. So my question for you on the sign is, would you rather us discuss that with you in I'm kind of leading here. I'd almost prefer it, but let me know your thoughts. Would you like us to review the sign tonight, or would you rather look at it in a cohesive application next month?
Well, it would make sense in a cohesive application. However, if you see something that is outstanding and needs to be changed, I'd rather hear it now.
Right now, and quite honestly, I kind of like the interplay between the brown and the sort of rust. So color-wise, you're in the right direction?
Yes, the rust is actually, I have a swatch of that if you'd like to see it.
Yeah, sure. And then just as far as the,
In fact, that was to further complicate things.
yeah, as far as the,
Thinking about painting the door the same color as the background on the sign.
well, you just got approval for
I know
brown,
that,
so.
but maybe the next stage. We
Great, we could do that too.
That approval is an intermediary stage.
That's great, no problem. Yeah, I mean, you got the paintbrush out anyway, just color it brown for
I'm an
now.
artist, so I, paint to me is
As far as the sign color, we'll look at it.
background would be the
Can we look at it in context of the brown? And as far as the lettering and the color of the lettering,
is,
lettering's gold?
I have that, hold on one moment. Is that it? Yes, the lettering is Benjamin Moore Lightning Bolt, I have that.
Chappelle.
Bear with me, sorry.
While we're waiting here, I want to raise something though. While we're waiting here, I want to raise something, and that is that even though, I feel like you're truncating the conversation on the facade. Do you really want a proliferation of chunky columns on that facade? The way some of these houses have been renovated with these massive cylindrical columns that look like they're squeezing the porch out of existence. And, you want to rush through that discussion and then have it again next month when it comes back with a drawing and it has like 3 columns when maybe it could be 2 and they could be narrower, or do you just not care? I mean, I think it's you don't want just like a wacky applique, right? I don't think you do. I know you want to get out of here,
Here's the way
so
I
do
look
I.
at this.
But
You don't
you're
have to
kind of
ask
like
me.
truncating. You're like, okay, we're done. No, I think it's important though.
I never said we're done.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't. You have the opportunity, so don't ask me.
We were having a
ask the
discussion.
applicant. I never said we were
and
done.
you're like, okay, we're talking color. We're going to go to the sign
Go back
now.
to the
We're
record.
going to go to the
I
sign.
never said we're done, and you have the opportunity, when I decide to go to the sign, to say, may I add something? You're welcome to do that. So please don't characterize me as truncating the conversation.
Watch yourself on the video next time. Or go do an instant replay next, after this is over, and take a look at it, and then just try to see it from my perspective.
How would you like to, I'd like you to finish this, please.
Okay.
In any way, shape, or form you see fit.
I am going to take the opportunity to go back to this for a second, because
Yes.
before, and one of the reasons I want to do this is that I don't want to have you go off and produce a drawing that we requested, and then have you come back next month and have me ask the question to you, why are you trying to jam 3 columns onto this facade when perhaps it might seem more appropriate, or in just keeping with the construction of this type of building, is to have 2 columns framing the display window.
Okay.
And there's another one kind of, it looks to me a little bit kind of crowded in next to the entrance. And so I just want to come out and say that now and give you time to think about it and consider it.
Sure.
Like I said, before you go through the trouble of producing a scale drawing. And I'll leave it at that, and I'll just say that, and building on what Kevin said about, look at the adjoining storefronts. The columns are a little bit slenderer, and I feel it's important to say this because I'm seeing in the city a proliferation of renovated porches on houses with kind of elephantine cylindrical columns that they can barely fit on the porch, and it seems like there's too many of them. And I think if we're going to go through the trouble of reviewing the facade, it just makes sense to kind of like have that discussion now and not race past it, and then give you more comments next time and have you come back, potentially result in a situation where you're coming back a third time.
Okay.
So thank you, that's it.
Well received, I understand.
Appreciate it. So I'm sorry to interject that, but, so we'll return to the sign, please.
Okay, no problem, thank you. Got it.
Please proceed.
I will. I'm just
Finish up.
I'm gonna pull it up, and I'm frustrated by an incredibly slow network connection right now. So we have both, can you please just come back and approach and just show us the two, or the different, point out again the different colors on the sign, on the chips?
Oh, sure. So, classic burgundy.
Okay.
The background.
Behind the lettering?
Correct.
And then the lettering itself?
It'll be very pale yellow, Benjamin Moore.
Do you have the brown with you still?
Sure.
Could we just see that with the burgundy?
Give me a second, sure. Yes.
Oh, that's cool. I like it.
Any comments for anybody on the font or the color combinations for the sign?
Font is basket.
Yeah, I think, I don't have any problems with the colors. I think it's fairly, it's with the colors are within a pretty narrow range, so.
I don't have any further questions about does anybody else have any other comments about the sign itself? I don't have any further comments.
Oh, you want to hold to?
Do we need to get those other color codes entered into the record?
No.
Okay, then
These are not part of what we're actually acting on at the moment.
Okay, so I will redo the drawing more precisely, and hopefully see you folks next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Good evening.
Thanks.
You want to take the next one?
You know what?
Go for it.
Don't,
Next.
My next.
Hi.
Hi, good evening. Jason Caritas with Corcoran Country Living, proposing to paint the facade of 215 Main Street and seeking a permit for a one-sided sign above the doorway. And as for the colors, I was also looking at 3 similar shades of gray, all historic Benjamin Moore, which I have if you want to. I'm not married to anything.
I only see really 2 different shades of gray on the rendering, on the elevation.
Oh, it's actually monochromatic. It's all going. I mean, I haven't
You're
selected
looking at-
anything.
okay.
I've picked out 3.
Yeah, it's really subtle changes.
Right, yeah, 3 shades of Benjamin Moore historic gray. But
Okay. But there's some trim detail that it's darker?
it's not. It looks like that in the rendering, but it's actually monochromatic.
Okay.
Anything else?
Comments or?
Go for it.
No. One of the things that might be an issue is that, you can only get storefront doors in a limited amount of bronze colors, right? And so it might be tough to have that work with your gray, right? You might want to try a sample of that and select the gray based upon what has the least amount. There may be a jarring contrast between the two browns or grays or whatever they are.
The door actually is wood. It was, I've purchased it. I found a historic door at the shop in Newburgh across the river.
I know the place. Sure, great, okay. Nice. And so it will be the same gray, or
yes,
it's the same situation where the trim just looks different in the rendering?
The door may, or again, I don't feel strongly about it. The door could be black, the color of the awning, or it could be, I think it probably should, there should be some contrast, but it might be a different shade of gray.
Mm-hmm.
I like it as a contrast, the door.
Okay. So I can go black with the door, same as the awning,
I like
and then
it.
keep the facade gray.
Otherwise, it looks nice.
All right, so that, and then
Thank you.
you're memorializing that tonight. You're gonna go the doors. You're gonna choose to paint black, and
I'm sorry. Say it again.
I said you're memorializing that decision tonight to make the door black.
Sure.
And to, yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't have any questions or comments on this one.
Anyone else?
Do you have a sample of the gray?
I do. These are the three historic ways that I was looking at. I like the one in the middle personally. With the door and the awning speed, obviously.
Yeah, that is a nice color.
May I take a look? This one you're interested in? Yeah, looks great. We have to give that name and number to Amanda for the record.
Yeah, sure, you know.
Yeah, I can do it.
And also, I haven't purchased the light yet, but it seems to be consistent with the light showing down the block. So it's the same
Yep.
historic block.
That's the fixture you have here in your
Yes.
package.
try.
Yep.
And there are actually two of them that we're replacing.
Anything else?
Does that meet all of our? What does that meet our? I'm not familiar with our lighting standards, but it's a downward angle that meets all the.
That's in Bruce's.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, yeah, as long as it's down, the traffic is fine.
Okay.
It's not going to reflect light up or okay.
I think my contract actually literally took it from the building next door, so it's the same one.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anyone else? Go ahead.
Oh, the only thing I wasn't sure about was whether or not that sign was in the plane of the glass in front, or whether it's set back towards the door.
The glass was actually removed. It's plywood now, so it would be inset above the door.
Right.
But unfortunately, the glass is not there.
Okay, good. It just so I understand, I think it'd be fine either way.
I'll accept a motion to approve unless there's anything else.
Motion.
Motion by Karen.
Seconded.
Second by Len. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Thanks.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion by everybody. Motion by Kevin.
Second.
Second by Karen. All in favor?
Aye.